Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Some people just like,
Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll give it just 30 more seconds to let people trickle in and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on our quarterly Nonprofit Bites and Insights. This is our last one for the year. If you can imagine, 2021 is almost over. As a reminder, we are recording this. We will be sharing this recording along with the slide deck at the end of the workshop. My name is Yen Ting. I am Program Associate with Aparo. For those of you who are new to Aparo, we are a nonprofit that provides services to other nonprofits to help meet their technology and business process needs. And so one of these services is what we like to call our Nonprofit Bites and Insights, which is what we're doing right now. These are held quarterly and are workshops or webinars on various topics that we think some of our nonprofit partners might find useful. And very excited for today's workshop on the power of PR for nonprofits. I know after this hour, you're going to walk away with some really handy tips when it comes to PR for your nonprofit to help raise awareness to your missions, engage a broader audience, and possibly get more donors, funds, money. So we're really excited today for our speaker who has volunteered her time to share with us on some key PR strategies for nonprofits. Neff Best, she is co-founder and chief communications officer for Pride PR, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more. I will be monitoring the chat, so please feel free to drop any questions or comments to the group or to myself, and I can ask the question for you. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Neff.
Good morning. Oh, good afternoon. Thank you, Yen Ting. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Blima. Thank you, the whole Aparo crew, for this opportunity to share. I'm super excited to talk about the power of PR for nonprofits. So glad to see that people are joining. My biggest fear was that we'd have like one person. So this is really, really exciting. I am glad that you're able to be here today. And what I'm envisioning is that we're going to make this interactive. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm zoomed out, I'm teamed out. I'm just kind of over a lot of the technology that we're forced to use now because of COVID. So I don't want to wait till the end and then have the questions or the Q&A. I'm hoping this can be interactive. I'm definitely going to walk through some tips and some success stories that I want to share with you. But along the way, I want to invite you to ask questions, share any successes or challenges that you are having within your organization as it relates to public relations. I think oftentimes we can learn a lot from each other. So again, I'm feeling this is conversational. It's going to be interactive, and I look forward to really making this more of a conversation than a presentation. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And just give me a thumbs up, guys, if you guys can see my screen. Yay, I see Blima has her thumbs up. Okay, awesome. So as Yenting mentioned, and you all know since you registered, today we're talking about the power of public relations for nonprofits. And let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to cooperate. Yay. I do know some of you that are here with us today, so it's good to see familiar faces, and there are some of you that I don't know. So I just want to share a little bit about myself. As Yenting mentioned, I am Nefertara Best. I know that's a mouthful. Friends call me Neff. It rhymes with Jeff, so feel free to call me that. I am a co-founder of Pride Public Relations. We're a small boutique public relations firm based here in Charlotte. We work mainly with corporate, government, nonprofit, and small business clients. For the purpose of this discussion, I've kind of pulled out some of my nonprofit clients, and some of them are actually on this call today, which is exciting. But just wanted to give you guys a sense of the nonprofits in the Charlotte and other communities that we work with currently. And of course, Apparel is one of them. And so I'm so grateful again for this opportunity. Every time I do that, there we go. So as I mentioned, we work with corporate, nonprofit, government, and small business clients, but I am a little biased because I believe that nonprofits have the best stories. And so I am, again, excited to just kind of chat today and learn more about what you guys have been up to, how your PR efforts have been going within your organizations, and then share with you what I've been up to and how some of my clients I've been able to help in the PR field. But I often get asked, well, Neff, what is PR and what do PR people do? I think that's one thing that Blima asked me when we first started working together. And so what I tell people is, at the end of the day, in a nutshell, public relations is storytelling. We are tasked with helping our clients, organizations large and small, tell their stories in a meaningful way. And these are stories that allow your organization to activate empathy, build connections between ideas and action, and translate facts into feelings. Because at the end of the day, stories are what stick in people's minds, warm their hearts, and inspire them to action. So that's how I like to define public relations. I don't like to overthink it. At the end of the day, it's telling your story. So for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm going to go over, it's about 7 quick PR tips. I almost took it to 10, but I had to scale it back. I know we only have an hour today, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I'll go over the tips. And as I said, we'll do some questions and do some sharing in between those tips. I'll also share some nonprofit PR success stories and share those with you, and hopefully they'll inspire or give you some ideas about things that you can do within your organization. And then again, as I mentioned, we're going to have an interactive Q&A along the way. So before I jump in to the tips, I want to back up a little bit and let people know just kind of how I ended up in public relations. So I went to Johnson C. Smith University, the only historically Black college here in Charlotte, and I was actually a communication arts major. I ended up being the editor of our student newspaper and also ended up interning at the Charlotte Observer. And so I wanted to be a reporter. That's all I wanted to do. My first job out of college, I worked at a newspaper as the education and court reporter. So being in the newsroom, that was my jam, loved it. And then I had an opportunity. Am I muted, Yenting?
Sorry,
I lost your audio for a second, but you are back.
Okay, all right, I got a little message. Okay, so not sure where it dropped off, Blima. What did you hear last? I was kind of...
You really wanted to, I was so interested. You really wanted to be a reporter.
Yes. So I started off my first job out of college as a reporter for a daily newspaper. So a lot of people don't know that I started in the newsroom, covered the education and court beat. The first big story I had to cover after graduating from college was a murder in this small town, and it was a big deal. And All the more seasoned reporters were a little upset because they didn't get a lot of murders that often. So always been curious, always been inquisitive, and always really been a storyteller at heart. So after working at the newspaper, I had an opportunity to work at several public relations agencies, did that for a little while, and then launched my own PR firm and have been doing that ever since. So at the end of the day, storytelling is just kind of in my DNA. That's kind of who I am. So that's why I really am passionate about this work and enjoy working with my clients. So back to the tips. So the first thing I like to point out, because I get a lot of calls where folks will say, Neff, can you write a press release about this? Or can you help me get some media coverage about, an event that we're having? And so I always like to pause and back up. And just like with anything, whether it's fundraising or marketing or business, you want to have a plan, and PR is no different. It's so important that you start with a strategy, that you set goals, and that you have a plan, and then you work the plan. We never recommend that organizations just kind of send off one-off press releases here and there and kind of throw something on the wall and hope that it sticks. Of course, some things work and some things don't, but having a plan really allows you to have a roadmap to kind of guide you along the way. So I encourage all nonprofits and all organizations, period, to always have a strategy. And so I know that a lot of nonprofits that I work with, they don't have huge staffs. They don't have not all of them have marketing directors and communications teams. So they may not have a communications plan per se, but normally they'll have a fundraising strategy or maybe even a marketing plan. And so what I try to encourage people to do is look at those plans. If you don't have a PR plan per se, but you have something else that's framed out, take a close look at that plan and try to look and see what are the highlights within that plan? What are the strongest story opportunities? Because you may have some PR opportunities right in front of you, you're just not looking at it that way. And I think that's the beauty of just thinking strategically about PR versus just trying to do a one-off and get a story and work sporadically. So I encourage people to think about things like upcoming events, a campaign launch, releasing a new report. All of those kinds of things can really be PR opportunities, although they may not be built out within your organization as part of a communications plan. They may live other places, but think about pulling those things out and how you can amplify those messages, amplify those events, and really spread the word. And one example that I like to share about just, having a strategy and having a plan is a campaign that we worked on with Wells Fargo, a nonprofit called We Share Solar, and the late Jim Rogers, who was one of the sponsors and funders of the program. And it was a partnership with Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools where students were taught how to build solar little blue solar boxes that were being shipped to Africa to help light hospitals, to help light schools. Basically, these were places in Africa that were off the grid. And so the impact of these little blue solar boxes was just monumental. And so we were tasked with launching the Charlotte campaign. And so it was about a 6-month window, not really a lot of time, but that was pretty much the arc. And so what they wanted to do was get the word out in the Charlotte community about this program, build excitement. Of course, Wells Fargo as the corporate partner was very supportive in helping us amplify messages. And so we had to kind of put our thinking caps on and figure out, okay, what's the news here? And so the strategy or the plan that we came up with was that November 8th is actually National STEM Day. So we thought that's perfect, right? This is a STEM program. It's all about science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we ended up hosting a press conference at Kennedy Middle School. Jim Rogers came. We had kids there building their solar boxes. We had some great media turnout, and it just really was a great way to launch the campaign. But I'm mentioning that to you guys because, again, we had to kind of think about what's our plan. We're going to launch it. If we're going to launch something like this, how do we get the biggest bang for our buck? How do we get the media to be interested? And so, again, the strategy that we leveraged for this particular campaign was to launch it on National STEM Day. And not saying that the program couldn't have gotten coverage without that, but adding that in there definitely was a stronger news angle and a news hook. And so we had, I think, all of the local stations. I put some little screenshots here from some of the coverage that we got from WBTV, from CCB, and from Even on Twitter, Dedrick Russell over at BTV was tweeting about it as he was covering the story. So it ended up being a really strong way to kick off the campaign. And then throughout that 6-month period, we continued to push different stories out to the media to continue the story and not just have it be just this one-time thing. We checked in with the kids and we followed the story all the way through to when the solar boxes were sent to our friends in Africa. So this is the part where I'm going to ask, just for questions or any thoughts or any things that you may want to share as far as media coming up with a strategy, right? And just having a plan. I'm sure some of you have embarked on this process within your organizations, but I think this is a great point where we can kind of check in. And maybe if you want to share what you're doing within your organization that might be working or what you're struggling with as far as it relates to having a plan to tackle your PR needs. And you can drop it in the chat too. I think Yenting is also monitoring the chat. And if no one has anything, I will keep it moving. I see a hand raised. Yes, Blima.
So a press conference is not anything we've ever talked about as we've strategized around PR. So it just sort of raised my interest. Like, when is a press conference something you should think about, as opposed to like inviting people to an event that you're having or just sort of sharing a story of your work?
That's a great question. Typically, I would say a press conference, and keep in mind we're in COVID, right? So things are a little different now. This event was pre-COVID, but we have done some virtual press conferences. We just did one recently with Foundation for the Carolinas. So to answer your question, I would say press conferences are good if you have a big announcement, if you are launching a new initiative, if you are, maybe kicking off a fundraising campaign that you're targeting a broad audience. So something that's big, something that you feel strongly is newsworthy, that would be the opportunity to think about perhaps doing a press conference. And again, even with COVID, organizations and nonprofits are still hosting press conferences. We did a virtual one earlier in November that I facilitated for the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But we had a small press conference with some very specific media outlets that we invited to kind of give them a heads up about some news that was coming out about the initiative. So it's an opportunity to be creative because we are in this virtual world. But as things are opening back up, fingers crossed that the new variants don't get too out of control. But I think that, press conferences can be, when done right and when it makes sense, can definitely be an opportunity for nonprofits to think about.
Thank you.
I was going to just say, with our organization, I would love to see us kind of do more proactive pitching around some of the things that are happening. So I work with Children's Mental Health Organization. And so there's so much that is happening right now with mental health. Like, for instance, we were opening a facility right around the same time that the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Adolescent Division, said, hey, children's mental health is now declared a national emergency. So I felt like there was a great story there that we could say, we are opening a new location to serve children's mental health needs. And this has happened nationally. I think the challenge we've had is getting our senior leaders to kind of buy into and understanding the value that could come along with pitching and kind of having those positive media stories. I think we've had so many challenges with COVID. I think sometimes it's a challenge. It's hard for people to kind of step away and say, hey, I need to do this. This is a great opportunity. And unfortunately, if you don't sometimes seize those opportunities, the window just passes and you can't do, and you may have to look for another time to do it. So I think our challenge is figuring out, how do we get our senior leadership to buy into positive PR?
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's something to ponder. And please know that you are not alone. A lot of organizations struggle with that. So first thing that comes to mind for me is absolutely, it starts at the top, right? Leadership has to buy in. And what I tell my clients is this, right? No one's going to tell your story like you tell your story. So I love that you're thinking about being proactive and framing out what the messaging and what the story might be for your specific organization. I think that you're on the right path with that. I think that and mental health is a hot topic right now. So there are tons of opportunities where I'm sure your organization could plug in, especially when you're talking about children and mental health and suicide rates and things like that. So leadership has to be on board, and maybe it's just getting them to understand how getting your message out and getting your story out could potentially, and hopefully the goal is it will translate into broader awareness of the organization and potentially even increase donations, because a lot of times it's just being top of mind, right? If you're not top of mind, and we have so many nonprofits in Charlotte, which is a huge blessing for our community, but I think the challenge is that for those that aren't proactive and aren't intentionally sharing their stories and their successes, that it's easy for you to not be on the radar screen, or for another mental health organization who's maybe doing a better job telling their story to get opportunities, or to get possibly even donations and funding that you could if you were on the radar screen. So I think it's something to be thoughtful about. And I have a client specifically who does not like media. He's a CEO, and he feels like if you get out there too much, there's a target on your back. And so we've had to kind of work with him to get more comfortable with the idea. And the organization does get beat up a lot with some negative press. So I think there's some trepidation or just nervousness there. I don't see that would be something that an organization like yours would be dealing with. So again, I would continue to push leadership, let them know that it's something that you should be doing. And again, if you're not telling your story, then, who will? And so that's kind of what comes to mind for me. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it was. And it's so funny. I have heard that exact same statement and sentiment from our senior leadership. Like, if you are out there too much, that puts a target on your back and they're going to attack you. So it's that flying under the radar mentality. It's like, and I understand, but at the same time, to your point, the opportunities, the donations, all of those things are affected. So yes, but thank you for that.
Absolutely. Anyone else before I move into my second tip?
Yeah, Neff, we have a question about when we should send out press releases before and or after an event.
After an event. So before or after, typically what our process and protocol is that if a client is having an event, what we send out, and we're trying to get the media to come out and actually cover that event, we distribute what's called a media advisory or a media alert. And basically what it is, it says who, what, when, where, and why. It gives the media the basic nuts and bolts of what's happening, where it's happening, why it's happening, and who's hosting it, and why they should care. And so we send that out about 3 to 4 days before the event takes place. And then we also follow up leading up to the event, making sure that they received it, answering any questions, and asking them if they're interested in covering. And so that's our first step with an event. Then after the event is when we send out the press release. So for example, if the event is on Saturday, we've sent the media advisory out, inviting the media to come. So we've sent that out the week leading up to the event. And then on that Monday or early in that following week, we would actually send out a press release with all of the details about the event, how much money was raised, and more information. So that's typically how we do it. And the purpose of that is because if you want to get media to come to the event, they have to know about it in advance. And so media alerts have been a tool that we've used often, especially for our nonprofit clients that have been successful to get coverage. And then that press release that goes out after, some of the smaller publications will literally run the press release verbatim. So when you talk about controlling your message and having an opportunity to control the narrative, that's one way to do that. And then by sending it out after the event, there may be some other opportunities, maybe WBTV couldn't make it on Saturday, but they think it's an interesting story and they'd like to have you come on one of their shows and do an interview. So it provides you the opportunity to get coverage at the event and then also have post-event media coverage as well.
Going off of that, does having exclusive access appeal to the news outlets?
It depends. We just navigated a situation like that with a client, and it really depends. If you have a relationship with a news outlet or a reporter and you have that trust built up and you feel like, hey, this is a story we want to give to the Charlotte Observer because we're in the housing industry and Lauren Lindstrom covers us all the time, so we want her to have the first swing at the story, you certainly can. I don't love that, and I feel like it has to be the right opportunity to do that if it's a really big story. Otherwise, I feel if the goal is to get coverage, then share it with everyone unless you have a really strong reason not to. Sometimes organizations will do that if there's kind of a negative angle that could come up and they have a relationship, so they're saying, hey, we're going to go with a trusted media partner that we work with all the time and then kind of see where the rest of the chips may fall. But if it's a positive story and, again, unless you already have that kind of relationship built up, I think, the more the merrier. We did as I mentioned earlier, we did a small virtual press conference for the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative in early November. And so we were having an event on November 1st, was a press conference. Well, it was a press conference and an announcement, but it's a Monday. And sometimes it's tough if the event is on a Monday, you have to think about how much time does the media have to put the story together. So the week before we reached out, we selected specific reporters. It was very intentional and we were very thoughtful about it. It was about 5 to 7 reporters that we kind of gave them, I wouldn't say it was an exclusive, but it was more of a heads up, what's called kind of almost like an embargoed situation where we're saying, hey, this announcement is coming on Monday, but we want to give you a heads up. Here are some of the key data points, just so they could kind of get ahead of it and get their stories going so that they'd be ready to drop them or publish them on that Monday of the event. So that could be something too. Again, it has to be really big. That's not necessarily an exclusive, but it is more of a very intentional strategy for that they used in this specific case. So that could be something to consider as well.
Thank you. How might you respond to if a local media organization tells a nonprofit that they're only going to cover a story if it's exclusive? How might you respond to that?
Depends on the situation. It depends on how, is this a story that you really want to have? And listen, media they can be competitive. And so SOC may say, hey, we only want the story and, you can't go to another station. So again, if you have a relationship, then I'm okay with that. I don't know how I feel about that. And again, depending on what the news is and, everything in context, but just in general, if you feel like the story will be beneficial and it's worth that, then it's something that does happen often. And then keep in mind too, once one news outlet does the story, typically the others will follow suit, depending on what the story is. If it's big enough news, once SOC gets it, then most of the other stations will pick it up as well. So it can work out. It just depends on the situation. But I'm glad to hear that you've got some interest and folks want the story. So that's a good problem to have. Anything else, Yen-Ting?
So I know we have a couple more questions. We're at the half-hour mark and we're only on the second tip. So why don't we move forward with the second tip and we'll see how some of these questions might fit in.
Okay, and I'll try to move quickly, but again, answer as many questions as I can. So this second one is one that I like a lot, just because I think that it's often overlooked, but media partnerships. So thinking about, and again, this is a great pivot since we're talking about that idea of being exclusive. If you do have a media outlet that you think aligns well with your mission or with your organization, or maybe there's a reporter or producer there that you built a relationship with, think about talking through the idea of a potential media partnership. So it's a creative way that organizations can basically meet their communications needs. Media partners basically are collaborators, I would say. It's something that you can use if, for example, if you're having an event and so you wanted to have a media partner, an official media partner whose logo would go on the flyer and who would kind of help you spread the word. It can be a traditional news organization like TV, radio, or newspaper, or it could also be an online platform. And so there are a couple examples that we've used that have worked well that I just wanted to share with the group in case it might inspire you in some way. So we had, working with Beds for Kids, it's their 10th anniversary, yay. We did a virtual kickoff back in May, and the Charlotte Business Journal was our official media partner. And so what we negotiated with them was that we got a couple free ads to promote the event in CBJ. And then they actually assigned a reporter to join the virtual event and kind of cover it virtually. And so a week or so after the event ended, we were able to get basically a full page spread in the Charlotte Business Journal as part of that media partnership. So no money exchanged, just had the relationship there. CBJ is a fan of Beds for Kids and the work that they do. And so again, strictly media partnership. We ended up getting coverage in the Charlotte Business Journal. You can't see it at the top, but it does say sponsored content. But in this instance, it wasn't necessarily sponsored because there was no money exchange. This was strictly a media partnership. And so obviously we acknowledged them during the virtual event and thanked them for their partnership. I think their logo was on the website leading up to the event and some other things that we had negotiated in advance. But I think that it's a great strategy for nonprofits because it's efficient and it doesn't cost a lot, and the results can be substantial. Another example that I don't have in the deck, Girl Scouts Hornets Nest Council, I was able to negotiate a media partnership with WBTV for them in 2019, and so that included donated PSAs. Girl Scouts Hornets Nest Council already had a PSA developed, so that was great. WBTV was able to drop that into their schedule. Obviously, these aren't primetime spots, right? They're probably running at 1 a.m., but hey, well, beggars can't be choosers. We'll take what we can get. They also included some stories as part of that partnership package where we were able to come on, I think 3 or 4 times to talk about cookies, to talk about Girl Scouts, to talk about membership. And then WBTV also gave us the opportunity to put our cookie locator, which is basically some back-end HTML code that they put on their website so that anyone who visited their website could hop on and then find the nearest Girl Scout cookie pickup location. So again, just thinking, and that's just through a relationship that I had and that Girl Scouts had worked with BTV before, and who doesn't love Girl Scouts, right? So we were able to negotiate that and are, thinking about revisiting that for this year. COVID kind of killed things last year. But again, I just think that it's a great way to get some exposure, build relationships. And again, I like it because it doesn't cost a lot. It doesn't cost anything technically. So my next tip really quickly is when it comes to the media, relationships matter, but I'm sure you guys are all pretty savvy. You know that, just like with fundraising, just like with business, at the end of the day, relationships matter. So keep in mind the Charlotte media market is not a large one. And as of late, the players are constantly changing. So sometimes it's hard to keep up. But if you, as an organization, just make sure that you are aware of the media landscape, build relationships with local reporters, editors, and producers as much as you can. Typically, if they leave one place, they may end up at another. So it may be a transferable relationship from one entity to another one. But I just want to encourage all of you to know, that relationships are key when it comes to working with the media.
And if I have a question that relates to that, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about building relationships with the media. So we have someone who was told that maybe taking reporters to coffee, maybe bi-monthly, helps to build that relationship.
Yes.
Are there-
So, yeah. Again, thanks COVID, right? Before COVID, that was a lot easier, but even virtual coffee, meeting at a coffee shop where there can be some space in between you. I think that that's a great idea. Build those relationships. Those relationships are priceless. And the one example that I want to share here is something we did earlier this year with Girl Scouts Hornets Nest Council, where they're launching a new cookie in January. It's called the Adventureful. It's kind of a brownie inspired cookie. They're really, really good. So I'm excited for them to go on sale in January. But we wanted to build some buzz and let the community know that this cookie is coming in January. And so what we did was put together what we called little cookie gift boxes. And so you'll see that in the picture on the right. Basically, it was a little box that had a Girl Scouts Hornets Nest Council label on the front. It had a box of the cookies and some other fun Girl Scouts promotional pieces in there. I think a keychain and something else. And so we wanted to deliver those to the newsrooms, because keep in mind, reporters and editors are hungry. They like free food. So take that for what it's worth. So we said, okay, let's get these in front of some of the reporters that we work with, who we know are fans of Girl Scouts, and just, kind of see what happens. It was a little unorthodox. Plus it's COVID. So, I mean, a lot of the newsrooms you can't just walk into like you used to. So ultimately what ended up happening, put together about 15 boxes. We identified 15 reporters in the market that we wanted to get them to. I literally my handwriting is terrible in that image, but we had handwritten notes that I signed and put my little business card in there. And I literally did this for my client. I went to all the stations and dropped them off. But before I did that, because of COVID, I basically DM'd everyone on Instagram and said, hey, we have a new cookie that we're launching. Thanks for the coverage that you've provided for us in the past. Have a special gift for you. I'll be swinging by. And they had to let the front desk know that I was coming. And then what ended up happening is almost all of them posted on their social media accounts about the cookie. So I didn't embed the videos because I know that can get a little clunky in Zoom, but great momentum on Instagram. People were posting in their stories. They were sharing their feedback about the cookies, and they showed the boxes. And then we also ended up getting some coverage. So Ann Wyatt over at Fox 46, she's who we actually gave the cookies to, because she's just been a great supporter of Girl Scouts. And so they were on air and they put a picture of the cookie up. They talked about it. They ate it on air. They said it was delicious. So our official campaign will launch in January when people can actually buy the cookies. But this was really a fun way to leverage some relationships that we had and just kind of tap into those relationships to help generate some buzz. And then two, it also helps nurture the relationship, right? It's a win-win, because they're helping us generate a little bit of buzz. And then also it's a point of contact. It's a reason for us to reach out and say, hey, we want to do something nice for you. So at the end of the day, reporters are humans just like the rest of us. So every little touch, it's like planting seeds and watering them, right? That's how relationships are. And sometimes things blossom fast and sometimes it takes a little longer. But this is an example I wanted to share with you guys. I don't know if any of you have products or anything. We in the past, like long time ago, we used to deliver things to the newsrooms all the time, for clients. So think about that. I think that, nowadays people don't really think about doing things like that. And honestly, we weren't sure how this was going to work because of COVID. But again, as things kind of open up and we try to get back to normal, it could be a strategy or it could be something that you use within your organization. Tip 4 is think like a journalist. And I think this kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier, as far as when is a good time to send out a press release or when is a good time to have a press conference. There are a few things that I like to remind clients to think about, because clearly every story is not a newsworthy one. And sometimes we have to manage our clients' expectations on that, that's great that you're having a grand opening, but we don't think anybody's going to care. So think about timing, significance, proximity, prominence, and human interest. And these apply across all kinds of content in addition to media stories. But those are the key things that I want you all to think about when you're looking for your stories within your organization. Is there a timely element? What does the article do for your audience? If you have a new report or you have a new article that's coming out, a new blog post on your website that you want to let folks know about, why should they care? Obviously, if the topic is close enough geographically or otherwise, but just think about their readers, think about their viewers, and just think about how you consume the news. What interests you? What grabs your attention, right? And so I think that thinking like a journalist, taking time to step back and put your little journalist cap on. I know that all of you probably have some amazing stories happening within your organization. You're just not thinking about it like that because you're busy running the organization and raising money and doing a million other things, as you should. But I would encourage you to block out some time and just kind of look through what's going on within the organization and seeing if there might be some opportunities that you may have that could be newsworthy. Right now it's the holidays, so anything holiday related, it's all about the season of giving. There are a ton of holiday angles that nonprofits can leverage, and 'tis the season currently, so think about that as well.
Now, what would you say? So there's an organization that has really great, compelling stories, but they need to protect their clients. So do you have any tips on how they can tell a compelling story while still protecting the confidentiality of their clients?
I would need to know more. And I mean, are they pitching stories that are about their clients or that are about the organization? I guess I hate to answer a question with a question. Are the clients the newsworthy hook? If so, then yes, that's a challenge if you're not able to mention them. But if you're trying to get a story placed about your organization, then I think you should be able to figure out a way to work around that by just focusing on the work or how you're leveraging innovation on, just focusing on the work that you're doing within your company. And then you can always mention that, your client list is confidential, but these are some of your, recent achievements and things like that. But I would have to know more to go any further on that one.
Can I was so glad that you were addressing this question because we have the same challenge. Sometimes we want to tell our success stories. Children's mental health. So there's obviously HIPAA and privacy laws when it comes to protecting their mental health. So that can be a challenge, is like, how do we tell a story about something that we've done that is great, but making sure that for children, we're protecting their privacy.
Absolutely. Well, I think in that case, now that I can better understand that, I think that focusing on data and trends, right? When you're talking about mental health, is the suicide rate among children increasing? Is there a trend locally in Mecklenburg County that is good or bad? Maybe the numbers are going down in one area, or maybe they're spiking in another. So I would say perhaps you approach it from that angle versus stories about the kids who, you do have to be confidential. And sometimes the media will change names and they will do what we call kind of over the shoulder shots from behind, so you can't identify the child. So those are options as well, but that can get a little murky. So I would definitely say lead with the data, lead with the trends. Is there a national trend with mental health that you can we call it story jacking, but where you can plug in what you're doing here locally and make the case for how it ties into what the national trend is, whether that's good or bad. I would probably approach it from that angle.
I've got, I guess, a piece to add. So we're a financial assistance agency, and usually what we do is we try to share as much as we can the stories of our clients, just to put a face to the struggle, because people have so many preconceived notions about what financial struggle looks like. So how do we get to where our donors understand what we're trying to do, but without sort of outing our clients, really.
I think that's a great question. One of our clients is Enlivian, which is the former Charlotte Housing Authority. And so we have an advertising campaign that we're running right now. And basically what it focuses on teachers, veterans, daycare workers, and people that you wouldn't normally think about when it comes to affordable housing. So I'm saying that to say, Erica, that perhaps there's a way that you can do something similar where you're more so focusing on a profile versus a specific person. And what we have found just working in the affordable housing space within Enlivian is that we think we know what affordable housing looks like, but really most people have no idea, right? It's the person you're sitting next to, you know, in church, or the person coming down the aisle at the grocery store. It doesn't look like what we always, or what we've been conditioned to think it looks like. So with the campaign that we're doing, our goal is to kind of help shift that narrative and change the narrative. But again, we do have some opportunities where we're able to highlight like first-time home buyers and positive stories, but of course the residents have to agree to do that. But I think in your case that it may make the most sense to really just focus on different maybe profiles and kind of changing the narrative around, you know, who we think, what we think it looks like. It might not really look like that. You know, it could be a single mom, it could be a working couple, it could be, you know, a senior. So I think that perhaps kind of looking at it that way might be one approach to consider.
Thank you.
Yeah, so really quickly, we're at 12:47 already. So this is an example that I wanted to share. Aparo has been doing a great job, thanks to Blima and her entire team, of just kind of helping to identify strong, newsworthy stories. And so this is one example that I love. It was a robotics competition that was hosted by Aparo and DigiBridge. And this is an example that ties into what we talked about earlier, where we sent out a media alert, letting the media know that this event was happening, letting them know the who, what, when, where, and why. And we also sent out a press release. So we ended up getting, I think Fox 46 actually came to the event, and then WBTV did something. In this case, it was in advance versus doing it after, but the QC at 3 story actually ran in advance of the robotics competition. So again, just giving you ideas about things that are happening, and then amplifying it with a public relations component. This robotics competition was going to happen regardless. It was already planned and being executed, but when the team kind of looked at things from a PR lens, they said, hey, could this be an opportunity? And as we talked about it, we all agreed that it made perfect sense. Here is another quick tip. And people do have love-hate relationships with newswires, so I totally get it. Lately, it seems like more organizations are using newswire services to help them amplify their stories to reach a broader audience. So I wanted to just throw that out. Some of you may have already had experiences, good or bad, with newswires, but if you're trying to reach a broader audience, or you have a really strong story, then it might be something that you want to consider. And this would be in addition to sending it out to the local Charlotte and Mecklenburg County local media. This is what I kind of consider icing on the cake. Typically, when you send it out on the wire, you get a ton of hits. We call them kind of vanity hits, but the press release will show up on different websites, and it's good for SEO. But sometimes it also can get picked up nationally and in other markets. So again, it has to be the right story. I don't recommend this for every time you send out a press release that you do it on the wire, although some nonprofits do. And it can get pricey, but I will say there is a website called ereleases.com that we use often. They're pretty affordable as long as the release is 500 words or less. You can get it done for about 300, 400 bucks. And they're partners with PR Newswire. So it's basically the same service as PR Newswire, but they typically can be a little more pricey for whatever reason. So as of late, we've been using eReleases. There's also a service called blackpr.com that we have had a lot of success with. They focus on African-American news outlets, and they also have their own platforms where they amplify any press releases that are sent out. They have a website called blacknews.com and blackbusiness.com. So if you're maybe thinking you have something that would be worthy of sending out on the wire, then I would encourage you to check those out. And again, this is in addition to sending that press release out locally. So an example of that is what we did for the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative. As I mentioned earlier, that launched on November 1st. We sent it out on the wire on ereleases.com, and then we also sent it to our local Charlotte Mecklenburg media list. This was a huge announcement, so I just want to kind of say that this is a huge deal. And so obviously, it was picked up. So Forbes picked it up, the AP picked it up, as well as, almost all of our local news outlets picked it up as well. But this is an example of where we amplified it via the national news wire just to get a broader reach.
So Neff, we have a nonprofit who's kind of similar, like they have an event and they got significant media coverage. Their question is, how do they continue to get coverage from those same outlets who've already told their story?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it's all about finding additional stories, right? So if you've gotten some great media coverage for an event, what's next? How can you circle back and, talk about impact? I think a lot of times, event stories are great, but they don't always hit on the impact. So I think that's what I see as like a starting point. But I think that you have to find those opportunities to kind of check back in and let the media know, hey, this is going on, or, this is data is always a good idea. If you have an update, if you can share how many people you've served, how much money you've raised, and really share the impact that you're having, then there's definitely opportunities for follow-up stories and additional stories, even though you've already gotten that great media coverage initially. And that's what we're doing for the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative. We had a huge splash in the beginning, and so things do taper off, but we are continuously looking for strong story angles to continue to follow up, because the same reporters who covered the kickoff most likely will be interested to know, in a couple months, what's going on with the initiative. Are there any updates? What's been accomplished? So I think it's important to remember not to just do kind of a one and done. This is an ongoing process. So you want to continue to check in. And oftentimes too, remember that reporters need stories. That's their job. Every day they have to churn out stories. So you're bringing value too. If you're sharing story ideas, things that they may not know about, you're plugged in your industry and in your area, they may not know some of the things that you're sharing with them. So I think that it's a relationship, it's a two-way street, but just remember that they need you just as much as you need them, because otherwise they have nothing to report on. But be prepared to hear no. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? You're going to hear no, or you may just hear crickets, right? They just don't get back to you because they're not interested, and that's fine. But I encourage you to just continue to reach out, continue to have those touch points, continue to check in, because just like in any business and just like in fundraising, you're going to hear some no's, but once you start getting those yeses, it makes it all worth it. So 5, I'll zip through this. We're at 12:54. Think beyond local news. It's kind of similar to what I was saying about the news wires, but I wanted to point out how local news can lead to national opportunities. So, don't poo-poo your local media. I know some nonprofits are dead set on getting national coverage, and not saying that they're not worthy, but just remember the value of your local market. We always tell our clients to try to saturate your backyard before you go to that next level. And I have a quick example for Beds for Kids. So mentioned them earlier, 10th anniversaries this year. I worked with David Borax at WFAE on a 10-year anniversary story. And a few weeks later, the producers from the Kelly Clarkson show were looking for a nonprofit organization that provided bedding. And so they did a Google search, the story came up. Literally, the producer went to the Beds for Kids website, emailed the info at Beds for Kids email and said, hey, we want to have you on the show. Can you fly out to LA? So I love this example because it shows how local news can lead to national news. Sometimes things do just happen organically. I know people don't often believe that, but this is a great example of that. So FAE here in Charlotte did the story. Producer in LA for Kelly Clarkson found the story, reaches out to Beds for Kids. One of their directors ended up being flown out to LA on the Kelly Clarkson show. And then a company called Sunday Citizen donated $30,000 worth of bedding to Beds for Kids. So I just love this story. It just makes me feel good inside. I just think that it's a great example of how, again, local news does matter. So, and it can lead to other national and larger opportunities. So once we found out that this opportunity was happening and that Kevin was flying out to LA to be on the show, they were taping it, right? So the first thing that we did was figure out, first of all, what station does the Kelly Clarkson show come on? And it comes in our market, it comes on WCCB. So I reached out to a reporter that I've worked with before at CCB and said, hey, my client's going to be on Kelly Clarkson. That's pretty cool, right? Don't you want to do a local story about that? So we ended up finding a local opportunity because of the national opportunity. So CCB, that's the station, again, that the Kelly Clarkson show airs on. So there's synergy there. You can't go to another station about something that's happening on a different network. So that's why we chose CCB. It made perfect sense. And so Brianna did a story. She came out to the Beds for Kids warehouse. The story was great, and it aired, I think, a couple days before the Kelly Clarkson show episode aired. And okay, I made it through all of those. So thank you guys. We still have some time left. So if we want to answer any questions, Yinting, I'll follow your lead, whatever works for you. Again, I'm passionate about nonprofits, so feel free to reach out to me even after this if you have any questions or if there's anything I can do to help you with your storytelling. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
We have, with this 3 minutes, we have a couple of questions. Let's see if we can get through. What are the best days and times to release stories and new information?
I like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We tend to stay away from Mondays and Fridays. Fridays are great for bad news. Like if you're trying to bury a story, send it out on a Friday, because Friday at like 3, 4 o'clock, because most newsrooms are kind of transitioning and people are checking out and the weekend crew's coming in. But if you want to amplify the story, I like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Personally, that's when we advise our clients to send out their press releases. Unless, now if there's an event on a Saturday or if there's some other situation where we have to send it on a Friday or a Monday, because of that, then of course we'll make the exception. But just as a general rule, we kind of stick with the middle of the week.
How important is it to have an in-house production?
If you have the budget, right? I don't, and when you say production, are you saying video production? Are you saying graphic production? I don't think it's that important. I feel like a lot of nonprofits are great at leveraging freelancers and other resources to get things done. So I don't know that it's important. Again, someone else may say something different, but that's my personal perspective.
About when it comes to media alerts, how far in advance usually, like I usually was doing it just like a couple of days if it was an event that would, but I just didn't know if you thought it should be sooner to give them more time, or is it more like what's top of news anyway in the next 24 to 48 hours?
I'm with you, May. I like 3 to 4 days. I like to stay within that window. I feel like anything earlier will get lost. especially if you're sending things to the assignment desk where they're, moving and grooving all day. If you have a reporter that you have a relationship with, and maybe you want to give them a heads up, or you feel like it would be beneficial to give them a little more notice, then I think that's fine. But as far as just sending out a general media alert to the assignment desks and things like that, I feel like, 3 days is good enough time. And then just follow up, make sure they received it, because as you know, things can end up in a junk mailbox somewhere or never be seen again. So I think follow up is important too.
Okay, we are at 1 o'clock. I just want to say thank you so much, Neff, for volunteering your time and sharing all this great information and your expertise with us. As you can see, there was a great questions and great engagement. So this was very much needed. So do appreciate your time and all
Absolutely.
the efforts. Everyone else, please expect a follow-up email from me. I will be sharing the recording as well as this deck. Feel free to respond to me as well for any other questions or comments. Have a great holiday season, everyone, and we'll see you in the new year.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Yinting. Bye, Blima.